I understand you don't have a checking account, but you're going to go over there and get another money order on payday, and you're going to take an envelope with you with a stamp on it addressed to her, and you're going to put the money in it before you leave the bank. Because if you take it home and put it on your dresser, it'll stay there, because you got a little point to prove. You want to be cute. You want to take it over there in person and tell her how to spend it. Like you know. He's pretty amped up by this time, and because he hated the deception of it. He said, and I want you to begin to do that immediately, and if you can't do that, get another sponsor. Guess what? I can do that. So that's a long time ago, and this youngest boy is an apple of my eye. This is the one I went over a year later and said, and there was a note on the door, you just send the money to the post office box in Portland, we've moved up there. We don't need to be seeing you anymore, but we want the money. And he didn't, my sponsor is so dumb, he didn't even understand that those two weren't linked. He thought it was separate. The child support and whether I got to see the kid. He said, those are separate. You pay that child support. I didn't see that boy again until he was 16, but I never missed a payment. And then last Easter, Linda and I are in Washington, D.C. That boy and his wife and his 3 kids live in Orange County, and he does very well there. And his oldest boy is old enough to start thinking about college, and he's a bright kid, and it's going to go to a very good school. And they'd taken him back east to check out the campuses. And they invited me and Linda to go and meet him back in Washington, D.C. And we spent a week there. He had a suite in the Mayflower Hotel, and Linda and I had a room, and we had a wonderful time. And on Easter morning, we're 7 of us at a table in the... And this Mayflower Hotel is a great property. I mean, Stephanopoulos is at a gym working out when we're down there. It's kind of the center of the big hitters, apparently, in what? We're sitting in the dining room at Sunday morning brunch this Easter. And there's nothing but love going on. There's nothing in the middle of the table that we're talking around. You know what I mean? There's not a drop stitch in there. And it was all based on the fact that I was, in those early days, willing to do something that I had not been willing to do before, and that is change how I act and change how I treat people. There is good, solid medical evidence today that changing how you act consistently changes brainwave activity. It changes brainwave activity. It matters whether we continue to act the same way or not. And that's why they say, if you want to change how you feel, change how you act. And we can work that as long as we can work it, and then finally we have to take these steps. But it matters. And sponsorship and strong sponsorship ethic is critically important. And when I got somebody in my life that can't change the way he acts, there's really not a hell of a lot more for us to talk about. Because there never was anything for me and my sponsor to talk about. And that's such a huge gift to me that I'm willing to pass it on. I got away from what this is going on, but this is father and child stuff. I mean, am I going to show up on time, ready to go? Like I would for any employer? Like I would if I respected my father? What's my father's duty? His job is to love me. His job is to teach me. His job is to give me a place to be in, a family to be in, and he has given me that. What's my job? Loyalty, honor, obedience. What a word to put in my vocabulary, obedience. But it's just an idea how it might go. It's just an idea in that sense. So he's the father, or he's the employer. He pays real well. He pays real well. Real well. Better than we ever imagined. I mean money. I mean material. I mean abundance. He pays well. And I wouldn't have imagined that. All that stuff that walked out of my life, well, everything I've needed has come back in. And more. And more. I mean, this is not like a vow of poverty to do this at all. But it's interesting and important that I get a notion, what relationship would I want? Because I know that it's going to be in place 24 hours a day. My mind is not dependable, but God is. And that's the key to the whole thing. And so, for being all-powerful, He provided what we needed if we kept close to Him. That seems to be all that, and performed His work well. We become less and less interested in ourselves and our little plans and designs. I love it that He threw that word little in there, because my plans and designs are quite grandiose. But He says, they're little. They're little guys. And that's fine with me. We felt new power flow in. We enjoyed peace of mind. Did you ever enjoy peace of mind before? No. Peace of mind, that's boring. All we got going on is peace around here. Hardly get by on that. No fist fights. As we discovered we could face life successfully, became conscious of His presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and hereafter. We're now at step 3. This is a fantastic prayer. It's very powerful, not to be taken lightly, and I want to point out that it does not end with the word amen. We don't see amen again until the end of the 7-step prayer, because we're in prayer from 3 up to 7, and then the prayer ends with amen. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to Him, and that is the thing that I had not done the first time I decided to turn my attention back to the steps. And that's why we set into motion all kinds of spiritual principles that we only dimly perceive when we begin this process. And so the step says, the prayer is, I offer myself to Thee. It's just an offer. It's an offer. He seems to have accepted my offer, but it's just an offer. To build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. And we talked about that earlier. What was my bondage of self? That I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties. Which ones? Whatever's going on. In letting go. In abandoning myself to You. That victory over these difficulties bears witness. It shows up, that people can notice it. To those I would help in my power, Thy love and Thy way of life, may I do Thy will always. And we thought well before taking this step. And we take it with another person. Very helpful to kneel down with a guy. Take this step. Very helpful. They knelt with me, and I kneel with others, voicing it without reservation. It sounds like we say it out loud, doesn't it? Yeah. You know why? Because my brain, the most important voice my brain hears is my voice. I say, I'm having a crappy day. It goes, oh, okay, got it. We'll deliver that up for you. Mm-hmm. Not a problem, pal. My Creator, and to say that prayer out loud is to affirm to my mind that something is happening. It's important. It's important. To kneel down is a good thing. To do it with somebody else is a good thing. This, like a solitary self-appraisal, this solitary commitment doesn't really seem to have as much muscle as another one. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, house cleaning. A business that never takes an inventory usually stops to exist. A business that's always taken inventory doesn't really make a profit. We're not here to always take inventory, but we must do this. We must do this. This idea of inventory is infinitely important. And he starts, and I never understood why he starts with resentment. And then he goes to fear, and then he goes to the sex inventory, but we're back to power. Lack of power is my dilemma. And I'm always trying to get power from something. And who do I resent? People that have more power than I do. That's who I resent. Or seem to have more. You know, a guy on the street in Los Angeles that comes up and asks me for a buck at that moment has the power to make me feel kind of weird. And he goes on my list. He's got power that I don't, Because I don't have enough power, and I know two things right behind that. I should have power, and I got to keep you from finding out that I don't have power. And if this guy makes me weird, then I'm going to mistreat him. I'm not going to be respectful to him. And I don't know, some days I'll give him a buck and some days not. But it doesn't matter nearly as much as whether I treat him with respect. And if I'm out of power, I can't do that. Can't do that. You're blocking the road, sir. Hi, how you doing? Good to see you. Sometimes that's all they want. I go down to the mission on Christmas and Thanksgiving and sometimes Easter, and respect is the coin of the realm when you're serving food. Merry Christmas. Look them in the eye. Love them, love them, love them. And you come out of there with some perspective, but mostly you come out of there with human contact and provided it. So the inventory is about all of that. We talk about the fear inventory. Who am I afraid of? People with power. And the sex inventory, that's the power one. That's power. Real power. And I'm out of power. So we stay with power here at step 4. We noticed we were out of power. And lack of power is a dilemma, which tells us we're power seekers, or otherwise it wouldn't be a dilemma. And now we notice there is one who has all power, and if he has all power, is there any left over for me? Doesn't look like it with all power. And that only took me 23 years. See, I move fast. Once I go, I go. Man, and the search is still on. I don't want to imply that it's over. I learn every day. So, this whole inventory business, if it's done like this, is fascinating and a little painstaking. He says at some point, nothing counts but thoroughness and honesty. And they told me, you'll write a lot of crap that's neither thorough nor honest. It doesn't hurt anything, but just notice that that doesn't count either. What counts is thoroughness and honesty. Now the prayer changes at this point. Instead of the set-aside prayer, the prayer becomes, let me see the truth. Because if I can find the truth, I can find God. I mean, I know where He is, and I've had that experience, but where is that going to go? I don't know. I don't know. Do I want a relationship? Yes. Am I willing to commit everything to it? Yes. Yes. Today I am. Today. Am I greedily after more evidence? Yeah. And then do I lose myself in the obedience and quit worrying about the evidence after a while? Sure. I do that. So there's 4 columns to this inventory. I think the most interesting one in his example is the top one, because he's basically saying, in effect, with Mr. Brown, who's on the inventory list, that this is clearly a justified resentment, and we shouldn't have to deal with it. I mean, is this Brown a 14-carat donkey? Is he a museum-grade yo-yo? His attention to so he's paying attention to his wife. He told his wife of his mistress. That's rude. And he may get my job at the office. Now, if there's ever a justified resentment, by God, we got one right here, you know. By God, I'm going to hang on to this. I don't have to. It's a justified resentment. You know, it doesn't matter. The first one out of the box, and he says, yeah, we know it's justified. Deal with it. Do it. You know, it doesn't count. Mrs. Jones, all of that. But he sets it up in column form. He sets it up in column form, and he says, make a list of the people, the institutions, and the principles that you hold resentment against, that you're angry about. They said, don't do anything else. Go make the list and come back. It'll take you an hour, and take a pad and paper and a pencil in your car for the cleanup, things you remember. And I made a list. Mom, Dad, Carl, my brother, my little sister. all of those kindergarten teacher. You know, I didn't have an energy on some of these, but they said that doesn't matter. The earlier ones are key, because that's where your old ideas came from. Why would you have to resent these people? It's because you hold the notion that they broke the rules. They're the script busters. You know. Said it's interesting, isn't it? You're, as an example, I was mad at my mom because she hid the money from us. She always pretended during the war that we didn't have any money. I knew we had money, but she wouldn't give me any money. And then my dad came home from the war, and she popped out with a passbook account of $5,000 in it that she'd saved up, and I'm thinking, I knew it. They said, you know, not everybody'd react like that. You know that? Not everyone, that's it, that's your resentment. Some other kid might think, man, my mom was so smart to rat hole that money. And think she was really great. Not me, I think she's a liar. So, what does that tell me about my rule? It tells me that I got this little rule going on that I know women will always lie about money. There's a one to take into the world with you, boy. That'll come back to bite you in the butt. Not that it creates problems, really. I'm just kidding. No. Big time. And they'll withhold money. Yeah. They lie about it and they withhold it. And they should do neither. They're supposed to what? Disclose all their money to a 7-year-old kid. Oh, good, yeah. Let's sit down and go over the books, Clint. So it's my old idea they should disclose everything. And they will disclose nothing, and they will withhold everything. These are my ideas. I wasn't born that way. This is just a mind that's got it wired up kind of funny. And do you think I would defend that stupid idea to the bitter end? Yes. Yes. But they begin to float up, see? They begin to float up. That's the point of this drill. But the first piece of it is to simply list these people. Because I've jumped ahead a couple of columns here. You can take it. I know you can take it. Took about an hour. But the prayer is, let me see the truth. Go back as far as you can. Even though you don't have real energy on it today, but remember it. And you can't describe you can't say the name. The girl in the red sweater in the 2nd grade, that's good enough. Because I know what she did. She told on me. She told on me. And I had to go stand in the cloak closet. I don't even remember what she told him, but I'm sure it was true. And I'm sure it had something to do with sex, but I don't know what. We start out pretty early, really, in our minds, don't we? And then the institutions, who am I mad at? I have Marine Corps, the dental school, the IRS, the institution of marriage, the institution of saluting. I have to acknowledge my superiors. This institution, that institution. What principle? Principle, you have to pay your bills? That annoys me. Principle, you have to be faithful in a marriage, keep your agreements. What an unwieldy little principle that is. Those kinds of things, those principles, and those institutions, and those people. Because we all got this list. And it's not far from the surface, and it comes up pretty fast. And then as I drove around doing whatever the next few days, I would, I remember that guy, I'll put his name down, I'll write this down, I'll write whatever. And I went back to him, I had my list, one column. It was just a list of names, principles, institutions, with whom I was angry. And then they said, now you got to say why you're angry. as to each one of those. And there was maybe 5 reasons I was mad at my mom. She didn't believe me. She kept the money. She wouldn't share it with me, wouldn't give it to me on demand. She beat me. She had an ironing cord, electric ironing cord with rubber installation on it. She liked that one because, I don't know why she liked it, but it was a painful thing. And she got very angry, and she would do that. So I was mad about that. Because a kid knows if it's appropriate or inappropriate, you know. We know. And I was mad, and so I had these... she wouldn't protect me against my grandmother. She made me go to church. She, whatever the hell it was. All of these things. And some of them, you know, by the time you get here, you realize this really is... some of these are so stupid to be angry about. They're just so dumb. But they said, don't worry about that. Just write it. If it was ever a resentment, write it down. Why are you angry at your dad? Well, he's a drunk. Well, he liked booze better than me. Well, he liked... blah, blah, and on that goes. And my brother, well, my brother could beat me up. And this kind of... my sister, she tattled on me. My sister was an irritant. She came along and bumped me out of first place. All of that kind of stuff. And down the list and down the list. And then the format changed a little bit, because now the question gets to be, what area of self was hurt, threatened, or interfered with? And he gives us 7 areas. Now, if we're going to keep the covenant here, if we're going to do this thoroughly the way he says to do it, now I got to find out which areas of self are hurt, threatened, and interfered with. And the 7 are, you kind of have to pick them out. One is self-esteem. The next one is pride. The next one is personal relations, sex relations, my ambition, my security, and pocketbook. 7 of them. And so as to each one of those, why am I'm mad at my sister. I'm mad at my mom because she beat me. Does this affect my self-esteem? Yeah. My self-esteem is who I think I am. And I'm somebody that doesn't need and shouldn't be beaten like that. All right. Is that a crazy idea? No, that's not a crazy idea. What about my pride? My pride says I don't want anybody to ever see me treated that way, because I think there's an unseen audience all the time, or my brother, or whatever. And what is my personal relations? My friends should never beat me. It doesn't quite apply in this. Sex relations. Women should never mistreat me like that. My mom shouldn't, but this kind of applies to important women in my life, and it's the root of an idea. And also with it the idea they will mistreat me. And then there's the, what's my ambition? I want to be treated with respect. What's my security? I need to be treated with respect to be okay. Now we're in kind of pay dirt, because I can see where I've had my security all my life. Not in a relationship with God, but in the emotions of a woman that was fragile at best. This is an unsophisticated woman in the Second World War in Billings, Montana, with a husband overseas, and nobody knew how that was going to come out. All we got was a lot of stories about atrocities and stuff like that, and a meager allotment check every month, and no other source of income, and 3 kids to feed at that time. And she's got to wake up with her heart in her throat every morning. And I want to place my security in those emotions. And she didn't have the sophistication. In a better day, there might have been counseling for all of us. And we didn't have it. And I got my security right there. My security depends on whether she treats me this way or that way. And that is a shaky place to have my security, but where else was I going to put it? In God? Oh no. No. And the last one was pocketbook. How much money have I spent since then to be treated right? And where have I spent it? Just an interesting look at our money. Yeah. Did it have a pocketbook application then? Oh, not really so much. Just sniveling about allowance and stuff like that. Did it later? Oh, big time. Big time. Spent a lot of money to be treated right by the important women in my life, or whoever was important that night. Okay, we're going to have to take a break. Let's go. We'll go for about 4 more minutes, and I'll finish up this.
What the 7 areas are?
Yeah.
I can't pick them all out.
Okay. We start on the bottom of page 64 where it says self-esteem, pocketbooks, ambition. I'm giving them in an order they're in the book. I didn't have them in this order on my inventory. So self-esteem would be one, and then pocketbooks, and then ambitions, and then personal relations, and then in the second paragraph on the next page he says security and sex relations, and then down in the example on the right side at the bottom he says pride. It's on the right hand side of the page, my wife, and then misunderstands, and then the word pride. Those are the 7.
So thank you. And then the one other thing, what areas of self was hurt, something, or threatened?
Hurt, threatened, or interfered with. The words hurt and threatened are at the top of page 65. The phrase interfered with, which is another guide word, is at the bottom of the second paragraph on page 65. Yeah, thank you for asking. Any other question? Anyway, they just picked this book apart and said, you want to do this, you want to honor the deal, you want to keep the commitment, then let's do it 100%, because you'll never know if those guys were BSing or not unless you do it 100%. So I got all that down and looked at it. We went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we got it, it was apparent that the world and its people were often quite wrong. But that's not the end of the day, is it? Now I got to look for my part in all of this. What was my part in it? Either before the event that caused the resentment, which led to it, like sometimes we retaliated, they retaliated, but we looked and found that we had initiated the problem all the time. Or what did I do with it later? I mean, you get a kid that's been caught up in a concentration camp in Europe during the war, he's going to come out of there with some problems. Did he cause any of that going in? No. But what has he done with it since that time? Created a life of self-pity, created a life of, you should see what happened to me and you wouldn't expect anything from me. You know, I had a lot of that going. What have I done with it since? And I had to look at that. I had to look at all of that. What's my part in it? How did I cause it, or how did I inappropriately respond to it? And there were 4 areas: selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. Selfish is the idea that I have to do it all myself. That was always at play. Dishonest, is it true that she withheld money from me? No, that's not true at all. That money was there. We got fed every day. We got clothed every day. I never went without shoes. I got loved every day and didn't know it. She withhold from me? No. Was she puzzled by me? Yeah. Did she know that I had all that uproar about my sister? No. Self-seeking, what does that mean? That's where I'm trying to look good out of a situation. In other words, I come to you and I say, you know what, I need $100, and you got $100, but you decide not to give it to me because you want to buy a shirt. That may be considered selfish. But let's say I come to you and you give me the 100, and as soon as I walk away you say, I had to give Clint another 100 today. That's self-seeking. That is like, I'll do this, but I want to look good out of it. It's that. And the other one was frightened. What was I afraid of? It's usually very linked to self-esteem. I don't deserve to be treated that way was my self-esteem. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid that I do deserve to be treated that way. That's usually the fear. It's often caught up in that self-esteem thing. And then he gets into the fear inventory, and so we will leave the inventory there, except that these old ideas begin to float up, and after we break for lunch and come back, we're going to do the fear inventory, sex inventory, and then some other stuff in 6 and 7, because we get that new mind at step 7, which is quite amazing. Yes, ma'am.
On on the columns 1, 2, 3, and 4, you say do all of column 1 before you do column 2.
Yeah.
And do all of column 2 before you do column 3.
Yes, that was right, exactly. In other words, I need a list, and they said don't group them up. If you've got 7 things you're mad at your mother about, deal with them separately. Deal with them separately. Because it might matter which areas of self were hurt, threatened, or interfered with. And it really matters as to which old ideas were created by that. Or it helps me see what the old idea is by the number of times it shows up. Well, there that one is again. And my God, look how it shows up when I'm 15, and look how it shows up when I'm 22 and married, and look how it shows up over there. That old idea is kicking my butt. And it started when I was back there and I didn't even know it was mine. So they said, be painstaking about it. Take that and explode it. You ever see one of those drawings where it's kind of all, yeah, it's that. You want to look at it. Does this take a while? Sure. Sure. Is there a payoff? Big time. Big time. But yeah, good question. Thank you. But that's the idea. At least that's what they told me. And as I told you last night, I'm here to report an experience. I'm not here to defend how this was done. I just tell you what I did. Because I don't know any other way to do it, because that's what I did. And there will be some other way that you do it or that it's done here that will bring you peace and harmony and let you know that you're not crazy for thinking the way you are, and let you know that life is fundamentally fair, and that's where we want to go. And we don't want to get lost in technique and detail so much. We don't want to do that. The whole point of it is to develop an attitude toward this that we're not going to drop any stitches. All right. We on the tape. Are there any questions or comments? God, they all came back full house. Yes, sir.
Yeah. You keep saying you didn't do. I'm wondering, what did you do with Clancy?
What is it? What do you mean, what did I do with Clancy? I brought him as fast along as far as I could.
But he didn't take you through the steps in this same way?
No, when I had a couple of years when I went over to that bunch, and I had written an inventory and a 5th step. And he asked me if I'd done that, and I said yeah, which I had done. And I was making financial amends, and that was the extent of really what I did in the steps, except for a couple of other inventories for a while. For example, when I was at the dental school, I burned a guy's couch down. He really was irritated about that. He and I were living together, and then one day his couch was just on fire, and I don't know how it happened, but he blamed me for it, and just because I was in it, I think, more than anything, and smoking. So I sent him a check, long letter. I'm in AA now and all that kind of stuff. He was thrilled. He sent me the nicest letter, and he sent me the check back. He said, donate it to AA, and maybe someday I will. It could happen. We don't know. But I got busy in service and did all of that, and really had kind of not paid any more attention to the steps after that. You can, in that bunch back there, stay busy about 60 hours a week doing stuff, you know. And I did that. That's just my... But you sounded like you were a little annoyed with Clancy there about the way he handled it, and I wouldn't want you to do that. But now I'm a little annoyed with that son of a... Who else got a question? Yes?
The steps, do you think that you do the 4th step once in your AA or many times, or...
Well, that's a great question. Let me just tell you what my experience with it has been. The short answer is not necessarily. The longer answer is, and I'll tell you about it. Don Pritz and I were, after I was through this and had made amends and done all of that, he and I got to talking. We were together someplace. about the elegance of the power that we tap into, about how marvelously now it is, you know. He doesn't mull stuff over. If we're spiritually fit and make a prayer, there's going to be a shift, a change. If we're awake to it, if we have awakened in any way, we will notice it. Sometimes we just don't notice. And we knew, you know, going through this the first time in a slower way is like you have to tap into, you need the power from step 1 to take you to step 2. And you need the power from step 2 to take you to 3. And you need the power from 3 to get into 4. And when you bog down or begin to balk, like you get partway into an inventory and you can't move out, the problem isn't step 4, it's always the preceding step. Somehow or other I've drifted away from my commitment to turn my will and my life over the care of God. Or when you're in amends and you get bogged down, the problem isn't step 9, it is step 8, because I've lost my willingness to contact these people and make amends to them. And so you got to go back to step 8, recommit to that, re-ask for that willingness, and then you get moving again. Each step builds on the preceding step, which is why it's so important to take them in order. There is then, once you've been through it, you come out the other end spiritually fit and aware of your relationship with God, of having good relations with people because you've gone to them and cleaned it up, found out what you can do to make it right and done that. And you're in a completely different place as a spiritual matter. You know without any doubt that life is fundamentally fair, which you don't know before that. And you also know that you're not crazy. You can see how each one of these ideas is not an alarming kind of mental aberration, but what a kid would come to conclude. A kid that had kind of an attitude or something like that. And so you're much more at peace with God and with the world around you, and tapping into that power again is a much different matter. So Pritz and I were discussing all of this, and he said, I'll bet we could go through the whole thing in a day. In a weekend, he said. And he was living in North Carolina at the time, doing some work with, who was it, McIver, or somebody back there in the prison system. I flew back there one weekend. We both had written a piece of inventory. Me on a relationship and him on something else. Because I'm still experimenting here. What do I need when I feel out of power? What am I going to do? And I landed at Raleigh-Durham and took a car down to where he was and got there. And Saturday morning about 8:30 we started. We sat down and we started at step 1 in Bill's story primarily, and did step 1 and step 2, and we could feel that we were tapping into something. And we did 3 together, knelt down and said that prayer, discussed it at some length, and this maybe took a morning. And then we both had a piece of inventory ready to go, not a long piece at all, but a specific, I had a specific person and some reason, you know, that was just driving me nuts, and he had something else. And we shared that inventory. And then we had some lunch. And then we did steps 6 and 7. And by 8:30 that night, we were done, with except for step 9. And I got on a plane the next morning, came back, and made the amends. And since then, I have sat with. I flew up to Portland, where my brother is, and he and I and another guy did that in a day. I had 4 or 5 months ago had 3 guys over. Luther was over, and somebody else from San Diego area, and somebody else. We spent a day at my house, and we did that. Not just inventory, but the whole thing. The whole thing, the first 8 steps. And then went back and cleaned it up with whoever. So, having done this once in the thorough manner that this calls for, it's been my experience that we don't really want to stay in that process. It doesn't take you anywhere. It's much more important to get back and get into service and to stay in service. And while I'm talking about that, I must say that it's critically important to stay in service during that entire time, because that's where you begin to see God's grace at work. That's where we first spot it. It's where we get the information. You know why the message was of Christmas was sent to the first? You know who got it first? The shepherds in the field. They were working with the flock, and they needed the information. And it's kind of like that, you know. So it's important to have it come through you by staying with somebody, working with you, and staying in service. And so this is not something that replaces service, and it's not something that replaces unity, and you can't take a little bunch of guys that have done this and then just go huddle and talk about it all the rest of your life. You can't do that. You have to be, there's a point to getting cleaned up, and that is to be more effective. To be, as it says in the book, while we're engaged in making amends, the real point of it is to be of maximum service to our fellows and to God. And so that's really a clear point, because that's where my spiritual growth really is going to be, is in service, not in endlessly circling the drain by inventory after inventory. But sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes you just need the experience of going back and do it again. And so I think I might have, in the last 10 years, spent a day like that on 4 or 5 occasions. And so the short answer is no, I wouldn't think it would be necessary to go back and do all of this again. To do that might be a little more self-absorption than any of us need. But to do it once thoroughly is a wonderful gift. You got another question?
Yeah,
Go.
one more.
Okay. Well, just a minute now. Yeah. All right, I got you down for 6. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's probably not accurate.
No, as I told you on the break, I'm glad you asked.
This is, in my experience in the program, I'm 42 now. I came in when I was 28. I have been in and out of the program sober various lengths of time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, you know, in and out. And I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. It's like I'm one of these kind of habitual whatever. I mean, I managed to stay for pretty long periods of time. So my question is, after having went out, I have a little over a year's sobriety now, after having gone out and been out, coming back into this program, would you say that you would go through these things again? I mean, obviously, you're not getting something right if you're, you know what I'm saying?
Sure I do. Uh-huh.
So that's the question I have. Like,
all right.
if a person drinks, breaks their sobriety, do they start from the beginning again and work through these steps?
Well, it's hard to say on yeah, it's very difficult to say. I would certainly defer to a sponsor on a question like that. You said it, it's quite clear that there was something that wasn't quite there, or you would, you know, if whatever you were doing was taking you to that next drink rather than in a slightly different direction. It was my experience that once that obsession was removed, I did not have that again. I didn't, it was just removed from me. It says in chapter 8 in the book, God has either solved our drink problem or He has not. He solved mine. I don't even remember the prayer that I said. I haven't any idea what hideous prayer I said that last night I drank, you know, what begging I did, or whether I said a prayer or not. I just know that on the 14th there was no way for me not to drink, and on the 15th I didn't drink. And that is your experience from your last drink over a year ago. I can see why you wouldn't have a lot of credibility with yourself about whether you're going to stay on this path or not, because you've done this stutter stepping thing, and I don't know whether you just willfully decided to do that or whether it's been preceded by some medication that you took or whatever takes you back there. But if we really have to give up our right to chemical peace of mind if that's any piece of the mix. Otherwise we're almost abandoning that God's grace, because we're saying I'll just have pharmaceutical grace, basically, which isn't where we need to be if we're real alcoholics. Some people can get by with that. I don't, and I'm not a physician, and I don't prescribe or get into the middle of those kind of problems. I just know from my personal experience and observation that people that have had those kind of needs to take pharmaceuticals along the way are not faring well in terms of sobriety. People that toughen out and don't do that and ask for a spiritual, because as you can tell from my experience and experienced people here, the spiritual answer is incredibly effective and a hell of a lot quicker if we just follow this path. Nor do I know how thoroughly you've taken the steps before, or the depth to which you've done it, or the surrenders that have been involved. That's just impossible for me to say.
I appreciate it. I know that question's not a cut and dry answer, so I appreciate what you have to say.
All right. Well, with that disclaimer, then I'll erase that last mark, and you've still got 7 questions. Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Okay. You know what? Prayerful consideration of that with a sponsor is really key. But yeah, I think we have to ask. I have a friend named Paul in Chicago, and he says, if I have any message, he's been sober 54 years, if I have any message, it's the message of one beggar talking to another beggar about where the bread is. Yeah. We better ask. Yeah, we're just beggars. But he'll always respond. Yes?
You may have answered this question already, but I've heard people say that they do the steps once a year, or they just do 10, 11, and 12, or whatever, to kind of maintain that spiritual condition that they have. Do you, I guess these episodes that you go through the entire 12 steps, or 1 through 8, on, in a day or two, is that what you do to maintain that spiritual condition? And if so, do you do that on a consistent basis, or just at random?
Well, I've done that on at random basis and not planned out in that sense. It's really an intuitive process. And the way, I think the most valuable thing I do in staying tuned in and being aware and awake, not maintaining but growing. The idea that 10, 11, and 12 are maintenance steps may be a little bit of a trap, because I don't want to maintain the condition that I was in when I finished my amends. I want to grow from there, keep on growing. And one of the most, it seems to me, valuable and most satisfying things that I do is take other guys through the steps, the way I was taken through. So in my office on Saturday morning, there will be guys in all different stages. There will be a guy there at 8:30, and one at 9:30, and one at 10:30, and one at 11:30. And on Sunday morning, there's a guy there at 8, and usually there's 6, 7, 8, or 9. Gary knows, he's been in that. That I am taken through the steps, and I get a front row seat to the transformative experiences of another human being, and I get a strong sense that I'm not so much loving that man, and I don't take women through. It's too intimate a process to do that. And Linda puts up with a lot of me being gone and that kind of thing, and I don't want to burden it with that, just to throw it out there. I don't think for me, it's too much of a distractor, because you really begin to love the person that you're taking through, and I don't want to add any push to that. But you come to love these guys, and you come to pray for them, and you come to know that God is loving them through you, and there's something through us. It's why, to go back to those traditions for just a minute, there is a tradition that says about anonymity, that it has immense spiritual significance. But when it started, according to the book and the way they describe the way that anonymity started, it was really based on fear. Because he says in this, surprisingly, It's important, and I'm on page 13, Roman 13, that we remain anonymous because we're too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. This he wrote in 1939. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not well carry on our occupation in such an event. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. And basically he's saying, if we published our names, there would be such a crowd outside the front door that we might not be able to get out and earn a living for our family. That was his idea in 1939, and that's how anonymity as a concept started. And then you go to page 568, and that's the long form of the traditions. And he worked out these traditions and sold them to the groups and so on. 7 years later, in 1946, the long form of the traditions was written. And he presented them in Cleveland in 1950, I believe, and then they were ratified in 1951 in basically the form that he described them in 1946. And in just 7 years, the idea of anonymity as important so I can get out of my house, in other words, fearful that God won't take care of me if people know that I have this gift, from 1939 to 46. So in 7 years, here's what he says. And finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we're to place principles before personalities, that we are to actually practice a genuine humility, this to the end, that our great blessings may never spoil us, and we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. And so I wondered, what does that mean, and how does that trace the progress of AA, and how does it trace my progress? Because a lot of times those counterpoints will trace my progress and yours. And there was a time in my sobriety when I was going through this process, I had an opportunity to be with somebody who had a 4-year-old boy. And the question was whether I was willing to participate in the raising of a boy. And it's like the universe hands you an envelope, and you open it up, and there's the lady, and then the boy, and you say, give me another envelope if you don't mind. I've done all that, I've done that, I've been there. My kids are all enough off the payroll, I don't want to do that. And the answer is, here's your envelope. Are you going to be obedient to this envelope or not? And because of some stuff that came out of amends and so on that I'll talk about later, I said yes. I said yes. And this kid and I didn't, when I was that age in our home, that's when the hell raising started from my point of view. And I had raised my kids drinking, but left when they were 4 and 5 years old in 2 marriages. And I know that part of it was because I was afraid of whether I would be abusive to those kids. I was very afraid. I could feel my anger rise and feel myself getting inappropriate with them. And I left. And I did not see, that universe is so generous, it'll give us an opportunity to do that which we did not do the first time around. We always get another chance. We always get another chance. And it's important to be awake to it and decide whether you're going to take it this time or you're going to do it in your 80s, whatever. Or not at all, and take whatever hit you get from that. And so I was afraid to participate in the raising of a young boy. And I got a very strong message to be there for him. And he and his mother and I were together for 5 years, and then she moved out of the area and went back to school in Iowa. But he grew from age 4 to age 8.5 during that time. I fell in love with that kid. I knelt down and prayed with him. I treated him in a way like my mother treated me in those moments that we had before I got angry. I knelt with him one night at bedtime and listened to him thank God that he was born at the top of the food chain. Now that has you laughing your ass off. You know what I mean? It's just like you go, wow, that is so sweet, They told me to go up to Northern California and Cindy was someplace out of the area at a conference, his mother, and I said, I'll come up there, but I'm traveling with a 6-year-old kid. And they said, well, bring him along. So I did, and we got off the airplane in Oakland and got into the rental car, and we were heading up there and talking. I said, Daniel, I love traveling with you, man. You're such a good traveler. And he said, thank you, the way they do. I said, no, you know what, I really mean it. I mean, for example, when that kid came across from the other side of the airplane and he wanted you to go in the back of the airplane with him, I'm glad you didn't want to do that. And he said, well, I didn't know him that well. And I said, well, you know, the truth is, I think he wanted to just go back there and get into trouble. And I'm driving, and he looked at me and he said, we don't know that about him. I thought, you little son of a... Shut up, kid, you're talking to your mother too much with that kind of... I mean, he taught me every day, this kid, and I adored him. I looked at him one day and I realized that this kid loves me and there's nothing on it. It was unconditional. He didn't care what... He loved me. And I knew in that moment that God was loving me through that boy. And so it wasn't long after that I knew that God was loving him through me. And I understood then what anonymity meant as a spiritual principle, because my signature wasn't on that love, you know. It was just there, and that's the way that it is with these guys. You know I'm not doing anything, but I'm living my life in such a way that God can love them through me. But it isn't my love. It isn't anything to do with me in a sense. You know, you've been there, watch a guy just kind of come alive, and it thrills you, but it isn't you doing that. And it's anonymity. There's your signature isn't on it. It isn't on it, and there's something very blessed about that. And I suppose that I have an interesting life and a wonderful, wonderful relationship with Linda, and and a home I like, and a relationship with a group that I like, and a lot of friends. And I don't think there's any sweeter time in my life than Saturday morning or Sunday morning when I'm with a guy and watching the lights come up. You know, and I think that's an important part of my deal, to keep fit and to keep tuned in. And it's so funny because I was going through this with a guy maybe 6 months ago now, Jim, and we were doing this thing about what's more important than a better relationship with God. So I did it again right there, just to look and see. And I'll be damned if I didn't write down, you know what had become more important to me than a better relationship with God was being real good at taking guys through these steps. And I'm looking at that, what is that? You know, all of a sudden I kind of started worshiping the process and worshiping my own wonderfulness and how magnificent I am in giving and loving. And is this on the tape? I need it on the tape that I'm really that. Now you know what he's going to clean up off that tape. And so I'm in the middle of a really important comment. No. Anyway, that's the deal. I think that if anything keeps me moving along, where I'm in touch with the miracles, it's just that. That's a long answer to it. Okay, all right. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask you, do you recommend a grace period for someone that's finished the steps and to go out and find people to sponsor immediately, or do you recommend a length of time to wait before you start the sponsorship?
Oh, I don't recommend. For the tape, the question was whether there should be some kind of a grace period between you get done with the steps and you start sponsoring people. No. I don't think it's our call to make. I don't think we can impose some kind of a arbitrary time limit on that. I think that if we're doing those steps, we're going to become attractive to somebody, and they're going to ask us to do something with them. Now, I'd also like to say that while we're talking about this, a guy will come up and ask me if I'll sponsor him, and I may not think he's sponsorable. And I don't want to get into it with him because I don't think he's going to do what I ask him to do. But that doesn't mean I don't have something for him. And I've often said to guys, I'll take you through the steps, and let's see where it goes from there. But I take guys through the steps that I do not sponsor. And I have guys that are sponsored by other people. I say, go ask your sponsor. I'll do it. But I don't want to step on his toes. And if he wants you to wait, then that's the end of that. So it isn't exactly the same thing either. I have guys that I sponsor. I get one for every character defect, so there's quite a few of those. And then I got guys that I take through the steps, and it's all kind of, when we have our guys, the meetings of the guys I sponsor, that's just one group, and the little larger group is guys I take through the steps. But no, we can't put, we love a formula. An ego loves a formula. And the formula is, okay, if you want to stay in good shape in AA, you go to 6 meetings a week, and you get 5 commitments, and you take 2 newcomers, and you go on 1 panel, and you call me every day at 6:21. And that's the formula. And then after a while, a year later, the guy's saying, well, here's what I do to stay sober. And you go, no, that's just what you're doing in AA. You're staying sober by God's grace. It isn't that. It isn't that. It's like we're beyond human age, basically. We just stay spiritually fit that way. But the booze problem is another matter. I threw that in just as an extra to your question. Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you were. All right. Anybody else? Thanks for the questions. I really appreciate that, and appreciate a chance to respond directly. We were at the fear inventory. The fear inventory is just that. It's an inventory of our fears. We could go on and on about the resentment inventory and the old ideas, but the press of time says we move on. He says some interesting things. There is a he says something that's very strange. He said fear was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. I'm on page 67. It set in motion trains of circumstances. Trains of circumstances. I can just see each one of those boxcars coming along and whacking me, which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. Well, I had a little trouble with that, as I did with a lot of this stuff. I said, stealing is something that I decide to do. And fear is not in that category, and I don't know why you say that you can classify the two together. And they said that if you'll just read on a little farther, you'll see that the reason that we have fear is because we have chosen self-reliance. And every time I think I have to do it all myself, and know underneath that I can't, I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to be afraid. It's like I'm afraid that Linda and I can't be in a good relationship. I'm afraid that we'll get into some hideous compromise of some kind or another, and it'll slowly deteriorate now, and another marriage will fail. And then I let that fear grip me for a while, and then I realized I can't do it at all. It's like, this is God's grace. All of this stuff is God's grace. She's in my life for a reason. She's in my life because God loves me through her, and I'm in her life because God loves her through me. And when my love for her is conditional, it's simply like, what dress does she have to wear for me to calm down? And there, of course, are a lot more conditions that I will impose on the relationship. It's kind of a different thing. But if I'm just living my life so that God can love her through me, then my love is more unconditional and not of me. And that is a different kind of thing. So any fear that I have is based on the fact that I have to do it all myself. And just like I choose to steal, I choose to depend upon myself. And he says perhaps there is a better way, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns, And just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending on our Creator. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. And then it says, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Well, you know what He can do? He can love a child. You know what He can do? He can love Linda. You know what He can do? He can be effective with a guy that's going through the steps. Because I let Him demonstrate through me what He can do. I always thought when I was a kid and well into this process that it was up to me to demonstrate to God what I could do for Him. And it never was my job to do anything for God. Never was it my... He'll demonstrate through me what He can do. The call here is we ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be, not do. And at once we commence to outgrow fear. And with reference to this fear inventory then, and specifically, they asked me to make a list of my fears. So what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of public humiliation. I'm afraid of getting ill. I'm afraid of some kind of a lingering death. We were laughing this morning about somebody said, we were talking about a guy that wanted to that died in his sleep, and and another guy that died while in a meeting, and another guy that died at the podium. And we were thinking that's not easy on the audience, but that's a good way to go, you know. Doing something you like to do. And I said, yeah, I'll tell you, I want to die in my sleep. I like my uncle did. He died in his sleep. I don't want to die like the passengers in his car, kicking and screaming. There's no extra charge for this. People are going, what did he say? What the hell was he? No extra charge for that. Let me say that again. Perhaps you did. But I'm afraid of failure. Now and I'm afraid of being broke. I'm afraid of no money, and I'm afraid of no sex, and I'm afraid of living alone, and I'm afraid of and I'm afraid of commitment. And they said, look at every one of those fears that you've written down, and then look at the opposite of it, and see if you're not also afraid of that. So I went back to my list. Are you afraid of failure? Yeah. Are you afraid of success? By God, I am. Are you afraid of being alone? Yeah. Are you afraid of commitment? Yeah. Are you afraid of being poor? Yeah. Are you afraid of being wealthy? Yeah. Yeah. So where does that leave me? On the head of a pin. I can't move anywhere. I have no wiggle room. I have no breathing room. I'm afraid of everything. 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 And it's run me all my life. And once you see that, you realize, this is just crazy. I better ask God to remove my fear and direct my attention to what He would have me be. Sometimes I hear guys say, well, you just walk through fear. You know what you get when you walk through fear? You get more fear is what you get. It's going to just be another fear on the other side of it. Fear of being poor. Walk through the fear, make some money. Now I got the fear of, well, I'll look real stupid and lose all the money. Somebody will steal it from me. Somebody, you get all of that going on. Anyway, you can see what the problem is. And you list those fears, acknowledge them, and really look at them. And sometimes it's useful to say, well, why am I afraid of being alone? Well, let's do it a slightly different way. Why am I afraid of being poor? Because then people won't respect me. Then I'll lose my friends, and then I'll be alone. Why are you afraid of being wealthy? Well, because I'll lose it all, and then people won't respect me, and then I'll be alone, and so on. Why are you afraid of commitment? Because I'll goof it up somehow, or get committed to a person I don't like, or something like, and then we'll break up, and then I'll be alone. It usually goes to alone, or dead, or drunk. You know, and my whole life is run by that. And the answer that they suggest here is, we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention what He would have us be, and they said, to really follow that instruction, and I have done this with really interesting results. He said, just sit in a chair and calm down and ask God to be with you. Always the prayer. When we were coming out here, the prayer is, if I go there, will you go with me? He goes, yeah. If I say, well, if I go there, will you go? And nah, you're on your own. You know, it's like, watch out, man, you're going alone. You don't want to go there. You kind of get a feel in your gut. And of course He came with me. And He's here now. With us. And thank you for that. Sit in that chair and go inside and get in touch with, I'm afraid. And you don't even have to worry about what you're afraid of. I'm afraid. I just got it on me today. Woke up with it. It's just, I can feel it in my gut. It's on me. Would you please remove that fear? And you feel the fear go away. You feel it subside. This is 5 minutes out of a life. Done it at my office. And then when that fear goes away, when you get calm, doesn't take long. Direct my attention to what you would have me be. And a word will float up into my mind. Be surrendered. Be involved. Be faithful. Be committed. That's all. Once I know what to be, once I get those little marching orders, I know what to do. It is not a mystery, you know. You know what to do. And so that was that. The sex inventory, as I said earlier, is really not about every sexual experience I've ever had, although that may have to be disclosed and should be disclosed on a list of take it to the grave list, if nothing else. I think especially in a first inventory, if we've had sexual experiences that leave us shamed, if we have participated in sexual relationships that were inappropriate, we have to disclose that just to be healed from it, just to feel like we don't have anything left to say. It's very important to say that. But for an effective sex inventory in this sense, they asked me to make a list of the women with whom there was sexual tension in my life. Everybody with whom, and it was not a very long list. But some of it was included women that I had never been with, but wanted. And some of it went way back. I think my second grade teacher made that list. You know, you just fantasize and stuff like that, but there was sexual tension there. And they said, make a separate page for each one of those names. And on one side of the page, ask yourself how that relationship started, even if it just was in your mind. Oh, and there are people that need not, if it's ships in the night stuff, there's not much to be learned from it, you know. I met her in a bar, she went her way, I went mine. I can't remember her name, much about it, and she probably can't remember much about it. And there's not a learning. I may owe her an amends. I may have to try to track her down. It could be like that. I'm not saying it's unimportant, but just in the sense of a sex inventory, it wouldn't be part of this analysis. And I would, on the other side, on that side of the page, how did it begin? How did the relationship begin? And what did I want out of it? And what was I willing to give to get what I wanted out of it? And what did I do when I didn't get what I wanted out of it? Or what did I do when I got what I wanted out of it and then didn't want it anymore? And I'm all done with that attention. I don't want any more. How did I handle that? And how did it end? Did she leave me? Did I leave her? Did we even go anywhere with it, or was it just some kind of irritable thing that we had going on? Just to describe and get in touch with the relationship and then answer these 9 questions on page 69, it says, where had we been selfish? And on the other side of the page I would write down, I was selfish by demanding whatever, that she spend time with me, by manipulating her, by being disrespectful of her when I didn't get what I wanted, by being whatever it was. How was I dishonest? Well, there's a lot of ways to do that. How was I inconsiderate? Whom had I hurt? Did I hurt anybody in my home with that? Was the person in my home? Did I hurt someone in her family, her home? Her children? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? There are 7 questions right there. Where were we at fault? And what should we have done instead? And they said, pay particular attention to what should we have done instead, and write that out. And after I had maybe 12 or 13 or 14 pieces of paper, and I had 12 or 13 or 14 answers to what should we have done instead, and they said, now make that into a composite paragraph, because that's going to be your ideal for future sex relations. And I did that. And before I think I brought it along. This may be